Sup, bitches?
I'm gonna fucking die here, Jack!
I had to suck 5 dicks to get into this show. Let's see you top that.
You're watching Fugitive Red Eye, and welcome to another episode of Red Eye Responds. To start off with today, we're going to be responding to We Don't Talk About Kenny, Telltale's Walking Dead Season 2. Now, I am working on a video about Kenny and why I say he is the best character in The Walking Dead. At the time I'm doing this live, that video is not finished. It probably will be before you see this re-uploaded. So that said, we're going to jump into it. There will, however, be spoilers for The Walking Dead Season 1 and Season 2. So there will be spoilers for the first 2 seasons. I can't remember if there's any spoilers for Season 3. There might be, so... Kenny's only in one flashback in Season 3 anyway, and that's depending on what ending you get in Season 2. But you have been warned, there are spoilers, so let's hop in. Content warning. Child endangerment, domestic abuse. I think this is bullshit. Domestic abuse. That is total bullshit and is not true. But we will get to that. That is just a fucking untrue statement. There is no domestic abuse in this. Fuck off with that. And violent imagery. I mean, it's the Walking Dead. Of course there's violent imagery. I don't know. Just seems like a bunch of pussy shit to me. Spoiler warning, yep. Both seasons. Again, this was pre-Season 3.
The first season of Telltale's The Walking Dead is the game that put the company on the map.
This guy has, like, the nerdiest, most generic voice I've ever heard in a video. It sounds like one of those Watch Mojo type things, like... You know, he's clearly hired to do it, and he's just, like, not into it. He's just, like, I don't know, super... Like, he sounds like... You know actually who he sounds like? He sounds like Doug from The Walking Dead Season 1. That's who the fuck he sounds like.
The reverberations of its unexpected success are still being felt throughout the industry. Walking Dead-likes, story-based games with branching narratives built on binary choices, are now a subgenre of adventure game.
Yeah, Walking Dead absolutely revolutionized this style of game. For better or worse. I mean, it's more of an interactive story than a game, but yeah.
The Walking Dead, we don't have Life is Strange, Dreamfall chapters.
Okay, well, this game is shit. Don't know what this game is.
Or Until Dawn.
I've heard this game is shit.
Not to mention everything Telltale has released.
This game is fucking great. This game is fucking great. And this game is fucking great. And this game I haven't played because Minecraft bores me.
At least since The Walking Dead has also been in that model. Walking Dead-like is now synonymous with a Telltale game.
Telltale is known for these games now. That's like all they're known for anymore.
Audiences expect and what people who license properties pay them to make. This hasn't necessarily been good for Telltale, being that nothing they made before The Walking Dead...
Well, look, Back to the Future and Jurassic Park, although they didn't have the choices like Telltale does, or like their newer games do, they were still pretty similar. They had the quick-time events, and very similar gameplay. They just didn't have the element of choice, really.
Dead was like The Walking Dead. Nothing they've made since The Walking Dead has been as successful, and...
The Wolf Among Us has been pretty successful. I mean, maybe it's been a lower following, and again, I think they've all done okay. And I like Telltale. Like I said, I think that their games get a little bit more flack than they deserve. Because, again, they're not quite games, but they're not quite shows. They're this nice, weird in-between thing where it's an interactive story.
And the people who actually made The Walking Dead shortly thereafter quit the company. This left the all-but-guaranteed Walking Dead Season 2 in the hands of a new team.
Which I think the new team did a really good job. Season 2 is very underrated.
Tasked with revisiting some of gaming's most indelible design, storytelling, and character... Fuck!
Yeah, can we just fucking stop that, please?
Don't be a bitch. Kenny's great and he carries Season 2. Fuck you.
Let me start again.
Please, can you just please fucking shut up?
Uh-huh.
The first season of Telltale's The Walking Dead is perhaps best remembered for the moment where you, the player, have to decide whether to save Carly or Doug at the end of Episode 1. The gravity of this decision...
If you choose Carly, if you don't choose Carly, you're doing it wrong. Carly is clearly the better option. I mean, granted, I chose Doug in this playthrough, partially for a bros before hoes joke, but partially because I pretty much never saved Doug, so I wanted to do something different.
Decision is telegraphed very clearly. No matter what you choose...
I don't think it's clear here, so I'll let him finish and then I'll interrupt.
Someone is going to die, and you're going to have to live with it.
Okay, so see, I don't think that's telegraphed very well, because my initial thought when I played this was very similar to my friend Spencer's when he played it. The idea is, if you give Carly the bullets, maybe she can save Doug. See, it's not that clearly telegraphed. Like, I mean, it is kind of in the way the choice is worded. But when you think about it, Carly could have easily, tried to save Doug as soon as he gave her more ammo.
Moments like these confront you again and again throughout the remaining episodes, and the game's stock in trade is getting you to wonder whether you've saved the right people, whether you've done the right things.
Which, granted, that's something I actually really like about Telltale games.
But surrounding these big decisions are dozens and dozens of smaller ones that affect the game in subtler ways. Who you give food to and whose side you take in an argument allow the player to express to the game who they want to be in this zombie apocalypse. But they also serve as contrast for the big decisions. The game makes it clear early on that you will be making choices constantly, and that any choice may have repercussions, but who gets to eat and who gets to live will be communicated differently.
Well, I think they're both important, though. Who gets to eat is still pretty fucking important when you think about it.
You make a high-level, story-branching decision, you will know you're making one. So what stands out about The Walking Dead Season 2 is how it almost never draws that distinction.
Well, here's the thing about Season 2. You're playing as a little girl who's not anywhere near as powerful as a grown man. And the whole point of Season 2 is that no matter what you do, you are ultimately powerless and fail, which I actually think is kind of genius with Season 2. Because a lot of the times your choices don't end up mattering, and some people may see that as a negative. But I actually think it's a positive in the sense that, again, you're a little girl, and it's a nice contrast between the two. And there are still choices you make that matter, obviously. But I do like that ultimately you typically fail.
You rarely know the difference in this game between a high and low-level choice. Sometimes the game tells you a seemingly inconsequential act was a major decision.
Well, like at the end screen, I think it's weird that hold the baby is a huge choice. But at the same time, with the connotation that AJ is really prominent in the third and fourth seasons, I kind of get it. Because you're supposed to... It's kind of deciding what kind of relationship you had with AJ, I guess. I don't know if that matters, because I think he always ends up sort of being raised by Clementine. Again, I don't really acknowledge Seasons 3 or 4. I'm very much just a fan of Seasons 1 and 2. So since the initial stream of this, I have actually played Season 3, which I actually liked a hell of a lot more than I thought I would. And I've played a little bit of Season 4, and I've enjoyed it so far. Still stand by Seasons 1 and 2 are my favorites, and I really hate the direction it goes in regards to Kenny in Seasons 3 and 4. And your ending to Season 2 in general. The fact that they just don't give a shit about your ending, and just basically half-assedly explain it away no matter which ending you got in Season 2.
Sometimes a seemingly important act of bravery is immediately undercut. Sometimes a life you...
Again, yeah, there's a lot of times it does that. Like, no matter what, Kenny always takes the fall for the radio. And Sarah's death is bullshit, I'll give you that.
Save is taken from you 20 minutes later. Sometimes a simple act of kindness gets someone killed.
False.
So this actually isn't true. No matter what you do, Carver will kill Reggie. Whether you help Sarah, he'll kill Reggie. Whether you don't help Sarah, he'll kill Reggie. Carver was just looking for an excuse to kill Reggie. And again, another thing showing that you're a kid, you're powerless, your choices ultimately will not affect things. Again, I like the difference in it, and I think that actually makes Season 2 kind of stand out.
Everything is riddled with uncertainty. Really, there's only one decision in the entire game that truly resembles Carly and Doug, where someone is going to die and you have to decide with full knowledge who it's going to be, and it's the last decision you make. Here.
And it's one of the most important decisions, and if you don't look away, then you're doing it wrong.
Here, in the snow, between Jane and... Oh, god damn it.
Pussy.
Again, seriously, fuck you, you're such a pussy.
Give me a minute.
Uh-huh.
The first season of Telltale's The Walking Dead is, at its core, a game about the relationship between protagonist Lee and the 9-year-old girl he swears to protect, Clementine. And to a lesser...
She's not 9 until the end of the season. Nitpick, but still.
...extent their makeshift community of survivors. Saddling the main character with a child preemptively answers a couple questions the player might otherwise ask. As you manage petty squabbles between a cast of antagonistic characters, any one of whom might get you killed, one question is... Why don't I just leave these assholes?
The only ones who are really assholes are Lily and Larry. Everyone else is likable. What are you talking about?
The answer being that, however dysfunctional, Clementine is probably safer in a group. The other question is, well, who gives a shit? What are the stakes if some dude we just met is maybe gonna die? How do we guarantee that's a difficult choice? Give players an impressionable child and make her convincing, and suddenly they're asking, what will this do to her? Will it
Well, I think that Lee is too good of a guy to not care about people's lives, too. I think you're overlooking that a little bit. Like, I understand that, an adult would probably be more pragmatic and make decisions based on a logical basis. But I think you are underselling just how good of a guy Lee was, too.
Decision protect her, scar her, toughen her up, preserve her innocence. In a game about making choices, that little girl is what makes your choices matter. Also, she's our hope for the future of humanity and our connection to the world before all this, and our main character's shot at redemption, and that's a thing male writers like to do with...
Fuck you!
Fuck you? What are you, a fucking simp?
Young girls in dystopias. It's called The Dadification of Games. I put a link down there. You should read it. It's a...
Don't be a loser.
thing. But the
You male writers, fuck you.
protagonist
What a
of
weenie.
Season 2 is that little girl, grown 2 years older and seemingly a lifetime wearier. This inverts the questions she was originally meant to answer in some interesting ways. She spends a brief early section of episode 1 separated from any adults, and the first question gets answered pretty handily. Whoa, fuck! Okay. Clementine needs to be in a group. And she quickly finds herself a new makeshift community of assholes. But the second question just hangs there. With no central relationship, the first episode feels like a game in search of meaning.
I'll tell you that the group in Season 2 is nowhere near as likable as the group in Season 1. I'll give you that.
Making all these hard choices, but what makes those choices matter? Midway through episode 2, I got my answer. I was coming up on a lodge with my companions, hoping to find shelter and honestly thinking about how much I miss Lee, when out of the crowd walks the second half of Season 2's central relationship. Okay.
God, such a fucking weenie.
Okay, we're doing this. We don't really talk about Kenny.
You're not just wrong, you're stupid. And you're ugly, just like your mum.
Talk about Kenny all the time, you lying sack of shit.
Turns out everybody's favorite character from Season 1 is alive in Season 2, and Clementine's relationship to him forms the backbone of the narrative. So, Season 2 cannot be meaningfully discussed without discussing Kenny.
Yeah, he carries it. Kenny is the MVP.
The way the game deviates from the design and storytelling of Season 1 cannot be understood without understanding what this new team of writers is doing with the character. But talking about Kenny is not easy.
You need to be stopped!
Yes, it is. Kenny is pretty much always right, even in Season 2. In fact, especially in Season 2, because everyone else always just wants to give up, and he's the only one who's constantly trying to keep moving on.
One thing that makes it hard is that, by the nature of the game, my Kenny won't be the same as yours. But when we first met Kenny back in Season 1, he was just another vision of survivorship, same as most everyone else. We had people who mediated the needs of their family with the needs of the group, people who kept their heads down and just tried to survive, people who abandoned groups to go it alone, etc., etc. And Kenny was there to represent utter devotion to one's family.
Which is based. That's why Kenny is great.
And how we treated him was our way of expressing how much we agreed with that philosophy. His devotion to family dictated that, for instance, if this old dying man might turn into a walker, you have to smash his head in and argue it's for the greater good. And, at least in the case of my Kenny, first try to get someone to do it with you because you're just a little bit of a coward. And being just a little bit of a coward was the big tragedy of Kenny. He could talk a big game about what was right, what was necessary, and could maybe even think of himself as the strong provider who could protect his family from anything, but only when the walkers were on the other side of a locked gate. Whenever the shit really went down, Kenny folded.
Hey, make sure you guys get that camera right there.
Yeah.
I don't think every single time that's true. There's a couple of instances of Kenny, like, buckling under pressure, but I really think he's overselling it. I think there's only, like this, he's taking his son and getting him the hell out of there. Is that really such a bad idea? He's getting his son away from the zombies. That's actually a good idea.
All that greater good talk evaporated. He ran from confrontation, and he left all the difficult decision-making to other people.
Yeah, again, he ran. Maybe he should have set Duck down and told Duck to run, but it's a, quick moment. A lot of shit's happening at once. I think that, again, he's overselling it because you want to get your kid out of danger, and I get that.
That really mattered to him was keeping his wife and child alive. The greater community could go fuck themselves.
And I respect that. I respect the hell out of that.
But then the community got raided, his son was bitten, his wife took her own life, and we had to put the child down. So in the end, keeping his family alive...
Well, here's the thing. We didn't technically have to. There's a couple of different outcomes to this scene. Again, that's how I always do it. I never make Kenny do it. But that's not... There's multiple outcomes, because it is Telltale.
Was something he just couldn't do. And that's where Kenny stopped being a philosophy and became something else, something darker. An image of what would happen to Lee if he ever lost Clementine.
This will never happen to you.
You don't know that.
Also, I know we're taking forever to get to the point, but we will get there. Just hear me out. This is hard. So how...
It's really not, though. Kenny's such a good character.
Kenny died, or I guess didn't, is pivotal. I know there's a version of this story where if you're nothing but horrible to him for the entire game, he steals a boat and leaves you in Savannah.
You're not just wrong, you're stupid. And you're ugly, just like your mum.
That is not true. That ending does not exist. He's full of shit here. It is impossible for Kenny to steal the boat. Literally, the invalids always steal the boat.
But in the ending most of us saw, Kenny is presumed dead after...
Again, the ending of him stealing a boat does not exist. He's full of shit.
Sacrificing himself for someone else.
He always does.
For my Kenny, it was Ben, who was...
Which I think is the better version. I do think that is the better version, because it is a big moment for Kenny to forgive Ben and try to save him.
By the way, kinda sorta responsible for the raid that led to the death of Kenny's
What do
family.
you mean kinda sorta? He absolutely is. Like, maybe he's not entirely, like, the bandits themselves are absolutely to blame, but Ben absolutely is responsible.
And whom Kenny had been insisting for days deserves to die.
Ben's motivation does make sense, too.
But, per usual, never actually laid a hand on him. While we were escaping...
Again, per usual, fuck you. It's because Lee, like, first off, everyone held him back, and nobody was just gonna let him beat on him originally. And, again, he encourages Lee to let him die.
Escaping a house via rooftop, Ben managed to impale himself falling off a balcony. And rather than let him get eaten by walkers...
What the fuck, Kenny?
Lee, it's okay.
This was my Kenny forgiving Ben.
Again, yeah, it's a good moment. It's a really good moment.
Was my Kenny deciding that someone other than his own blood could be family. This was my Kenny finally doing what he couldn't do for his own son.
And he does that in Season 2 as well, you just overlook it.
Even as a purely symbolic gesture, this one time, he didn't run away. That we find Kenny alive in Season 2 unravels that entire character arc, and that probably should have bothered me, but honestly I was too busy pressing the Hug Kenny button.
In all honesty, his character arc in Season 2 is much more interesting.
This is the first moment in the second game that just works, and the way it works is actually pretty sophisticated. See, Clem and Kenny don't really have a pre-existing relationship. They exchange hardly any dialogue through all of Season 1. But Clem's reaction to Kenny is credible and, provided the scene works for us, perfectly reflects our own. We miss Lee because we went through some awful shit with him and now he's dead. And as we feel his absence, we are given Kenny. Someone else we've been thinking is dead. Someone else with whom we suffered horrible experiences. Someone whose role...
See, when he's describing why this scene works, I completely agree with him. That's why I'm not stopping it a lot. This part I do agree with him.
Role in the first game was to be a mirror for Lee. Kenny is a surrogate for Clem and for us. The game has already started presenting its thesis.
It's a tough world out there without people you can...
To be fair, though, it's not only that. Kenny was just such a good character on his own, too, that having him back really made Season 2.
trust.
Which is a roundabout way of saying, who's going to be Clementine's new Lee? And at this point, Kenny seems like the closest we're going to get. And the game is not subtle about the fact that Clem also lets Kenny feel closer to the family he lost.
Pass me that can, Duck.
Such a good scene. So sad that he accidentally calls you Duck. There's so many good scenes with Kenny in Season 2.
Duck? Who's Duck?
Duck was his son.
Kenny's new girlfriend Sarita makes it clear that the only reason Kenny is remotely okay with everything that happened in Season 1 is that he's boxed it all up and put it out of mind. So while Clementine reconnects...
She doesn't actually say that. She doesn't know shit about how she doesn't know shit about the first group. Like, Sarita was like his chance to start over. And, spoiler, it doesn't go well and he loses it all again. But we will get there in a minute.
him to what he's lost, she also reconnects him to that trauma. And Kenny almost immediately starts getting erratic and confrontational. And that's not...
He's always like that, though. And that's part of his charm. And, like, the thing is I like how abrasive he can be. And also, some of the other group, like, they're just as bad. And in a lot of cases, Well, in pretty much every case, I agree with Kenny. There's only a couple of instances where I disagree with him. One of which is him getting mad at you for Sarita's death no matter what. That I do disagree with him, but I understand why it happened.
Not aided by the fact that this is a Walking Dead game, so no sooner is he reunited with Clem than all the horrors of the first game.
And also, the new group can go fuck themselves, because they lock you in a shed when you have a dog bite on your arm.
Come flooding back into his life. We'll just have to do bullet points from here. So the people Clementine showed up with are apparently escapees from a dictatorial community run by this dude named Carver.
Yeah, and they tell you nothing about that and how dangerous he is. They just don't tell you anything about that. And even after Carver shows up, they leave you in the dark.
Who raids the lodge in order to get them back, for reasons we're not going to go into right now. Several people die, including one of Kenny's friends, and the survivors are thrown into a truck and hauled off to Carver's camp. Once there, Kenny immediately starts pushing for an escape.
Which is the right move. He doesn't want to be made into a slave. Like, everyone else just accepts it. They just accept being enslaved. Kenny's the only one with the balls to say, no, let's get the fuck out of here. Fuck that.
Plan they come up with involves Clementine stealing a couple of walkie-talkies. When Carver finds them missing, Kenny takes the blame, and in retribution, Carver beats him till he's blind in one eye. So, when the escape does happen, Carver is incapacitated, and while they could just leave him, Kenny stays behind to smash his head in with a crowbar.
Which is justified. And if you don't stay to watch it, you're doing it wrong.
And Clem has the option of staying to watch.
This is such a cathartic scene, because you saw him beat the shit out of Kenny with the walkie-talkie, and to see Kenny get revenge is such a marvelous scene.
Outside, the escapees must pass through a herd of walkers, at which time Sarita is bitten, and while Clem can try to save her, one way or another, she dies. And at this point, Kenny really and truly loses his shit and begins...
Which you would expect. Someone who only cares about family, tries to start another family, then loses it all a second time? Of course he's gonna lose his shit.
Lashing out at everybody, but stays close to Clem, because Clem is now all...
He does lash out at her initially, which is one of the few instances where I think he did wrong. But, yeah.
All he has left. Hope is rekindled somewhat when Rebecca... this is Rebecca, has her baby, and Kenny the family man falls in love with it. Then while...
It gives him a new sense of purpose, and I think that's really cool. Like, it snaps him out of it, and he realizes this is bigger than him, and he needs to take care of this baby, because this is his family now. Again, Kenny is all about family, and you give him a sense of family, as does AJ when he's born.
While making their way to the next town, they get ambushed by this kid named Arvo and...
Fuck Arvo.
His family, more people die in that shootout, and Kenny takes Arvo prisoner, choosing to keep him alive when Arvo promises them a cabin full of supplies. Still more people die on the way to the cabin, and when it briefly looks like the cabin is bare, Kenny beats the ever-loving shit out of Arvo.
Which he should. Fuck that commie piece of shit.
By this time, the rest of the group wants so badly to be away from Kenny...
Yeah, because they're a bunch of pussies. It makes no sense that every fucking other member of the group turns on him. It's so retarded to me that literally none of the rest of the group can see where Kenny's coming from. They all just think that he's, like, wrong.
It pisses me off!
They steal a car in the dead of night, and Arvo, for good measure, shoots Clementine on the way out. Clem comes to in the backseat of a car with the only two adults left in her life, Kenny and Jane.
By the way, Jane, piece of shit. We'll get into her a little bit more, because a lot of your criticisms you're going to bring up about Kenny are much more accurately applied to Jane.
This is Jane, screaming at each other, and the fight escalates and escalates and escalates until we're back here in the snow where Kenny is going to stab Jane in the heart unless Clementine shoots him.
Which he absolutely should, because she led him to believe that she killed the fucking baby.
Fuck me! It's as if these new designers looked at everything the first game was. Difficult, complex, emotionally taxing, but ultimately cathartic, and took from that only one adjective: bleak. Bleak
is good. I enjoy Bleak. Bleak is life, man. Like, Not everything's sunshine and rainbows. The fact that you fail at everything is what makes it so interesting. I like just how depressing and tragic Season 2 is.
Midway through the game, I chose to help a scared girl tend plants in a greenhouse, and to repay me for that kindness, in the next scene, Carver threw someone off a roof because I wasn't working fast enough. And that's the game in a nutshell. Traumatize a little girl, give her a bunch of binary choices that don't mean anything, kill secondary characters at random, salt and pepper to taste, and you've got a Walking Dead game.
Again, a little bit of an oversimplification. He's not entirely wrong, but the first season was, like, again, pretty formulaic. And granted, it established the formula, so you can cut it a little more slack, but I think it is a little bit of an oversimplification.
I didn't see what was going on while I was in the thick of it.
This is where he starts to get really retarded.
It took a little while.
Okay.
But I think I get it now. My choices don't matter the way they used to, but that doesn't mean they don't matter at all. And this is still...
Okay, no, this isn't where he gets retarded. My mistake. No, he's right about this.
Very much a game about a relationship. It's a relationship between...
Wait, no, this is where he gets retarded.
A child and the broken, violent, self-hating man who wants to protect her so badly that he just might get her killed. She keeps...
He's not gonna get her killed. He's the only one with any sense most of the time. Like, everyone else always just wants to give up, whereas he's the only one who actually wants to go out of his way to do shit to protect her.
Him near because she knows she might need him, but no one knows better than her what he's capable of. She sees a soft and remorseful side that no one else sees. He's there to take care of her, but she frequently has to play the adult and take care of him. People are...
That's true with the entire group in Season 2, to be fair. A lot of them look to this child to solve all the problems.
Constantly telling her to get away from him while he swears up and down that he will always...
He only tells her to get away from him when he's broken initially after Sarita's death. It's one fucking scene.
Protect her, and he alienates everyone else who might keep her safe.
They're all a bunch of fucking losers, that's why. I don't know why they don't listen to any of his ideas, because, like, they think that he's such a threat, and then they're... Not only that, but these two motherfuckers are willing to steal all of your fucking supplies and leave a little girl and a baby for dead just to get away from Kenny. Fuck them.
God, it's textbook. Kenny is Clementine's abusive stepfather.
See,
Fucking bullshit!
This is what I mean when I say he gets fucking retarded. There is no abuse in any of this. It's a shit world overrun by zombies, and Kenny makes hard decisions. And he tries to say that he's abusive for really dumb reasons, but we'll get into it.
I've seen a couple people mention this, though only passingly. And
well, it's really stupid, because Jane is way more manipulative, but we'll get to it.
Most seem completely unaware, which is so...
It's not unaware, you're just wrong in saying things where there aren't any.
Strange to me, because it's only by understanding this that the design starts to make any sense.
Maybe the game's trying to push you into thinking he's wrong, but he's not. Kenny is very rarely wrong.
Whether or not you try to save Sarita, or comfort Rebecca's baby, or watch Kenny kill Carver will not affect the plot, and yet the game keeps telling you that these are major decisions, because they are things Kenny cares about. They are gestures of loyalty. Like,
yes, to an extent, it is about loyalty, but he's, like, overplaying it like Kenny only likes you if you do what he says, which is not true in Season 2. It's true in Season 1, but he praises Season 1. Kenny is so much more disagreeable in Season 1. Like, he gets mad at you for every little thing. In Season 2, he's willing to overlook pretty much any time you go against him, and he only gets mad at you, like, once.
Glee wondering, what will this do to Clem? Clem is wondering, what's this gonna do to Kenny?
Because she cares about him.
Which is a much more loaded question, because Kenny is not just a person she cares about, but also a threat if not handled properly.
Well, again, people overplay the shit out of that. Kenny actually, like... So here's the thing, right? In Season 3, when you see the flashback, Kenny dies protecting Clementine and AJ.
Hey! Stay away from him!
You gotta go help AJ, Clem. I ain't letting you watch those fuckers chew me up. Go, Clem. Now!
Okay, Kitty. Goodbye.
Good. Go. Now, goddammit. Hey, dipshits. Come and get it!
Jane fucking kills herself because she's useless and doesn't want to have a baby.
Jane? Are you awake? Oh my god!
fuck Jane. And she does it, like, immediately after you choose to leave with her, too. Kenny, you at least got, like, 2 years with him. Like, it's ridiculous to me that people think that Jane was somehow good. Jane is one of the worst characters in the series.
And the whole game is building up to one final question of faithfulness. See, in the first game, Lee made decisions on Clem's behalf, and she had no say in the matter. The second game begins shortly after the first, where Clementine makes her first painful stumble into the adult world. She gets Omid killed when she leaves her gun unattended. The player has no agency in this scene. You cannot help but leave the gun on the counter.
Yeah, again, you're a child and it's hopeless. Again, I love the themes in Season 2 and the fact that your choices don't matter for the most part. I think that's actually really clever, because it's a big difference of playing as an adult and a child.
For the first time, Clementine is directly responsible for a person's death, but she does not have the power to prevent it. The arc of the game is bringing her from there to here, where she has the power to get someone killed, recognition of that power, and the ability to choose who it will be. And all the seemingly muddled design is what happens between those two scenes. The moments where she can get someone killed but doesn't realize it, the moments where she thinks she can save someone but she can't. The game does not telegraph the difference between high and low level choices because Clem cannot yet recognize the difference. It's not a game about empowerment or disempowerment, but about the messy gray zone on the way from one to the other.
I think it's much more about just how fucked up the world is and how no matter what you do, you're gonna fail.
It's a game about becoming Lee, about learning to make the choices he used to make. It's a game about growing up too fast and under heightened circumstances, about lurching into adulthood as an
Okay, these things are true. I'll give them that. These things are true.
Act of self-preservation. The game's question is, in crossing that threshold, will Clementine recognize Kenny for what he is?
What the fuck?
A protective and caring man? Because he's nothing else.
Now, if we accept this as the game's premise, and acknowledge that it's handled with surprising maturity for a computer game about zombies, we still have to ask, what are the ramifications of asking this question? If the first game was about making you wonder whether you've done the right thing, the second game does something unthinkable if you either shoot Kenny or let him live but then abandon him.
Clem, you made the right choice.
God damn.
This is the right decision, Clem. You're right.
It is basically impossible for me to watch his death without tearing up a little bit.
Clementine is away from Kenny and he recognizes that he is a monster are the quote-unquote good endings. But there is still this equally canonical ending where the child watches her father figure murder the only...
It's not murder. They were fighting. It was defense. She started it. She made him think she killed a baby. She is a manipulative bitch who's been trying to turn you against him for her entire screen time, pretty much. Don't give me that.
Other person looking out for her and then walks off into the wilderness happily ever after with her abuser.
Not abuser, that's retarded. Fuck you. This is my favorite ending. The only reason I wouldn't do it is if I was playing Season 3. Because this ending ultimately makes him die saving Clementine. Or in a car crash, but he dies protecting her because he gets the walker's attention. So yeah, I was still right. Didn't need to correct myself. But yeah, calling him her abuser is such a retarded thing, because never once does he abuse her. Ever. Never happens. The only time he can even physically hurt her is if you try to go in while he's, like, beating up Arvo, and then he accidentally elbows you in the face. Which, why would you do that? Why would you try to help Arvo? That fucking piece of shit goes after you even if you don't rob him. He's such a shitty character. And he deserves every beating that Kenny gives him.
And there's a fair number of people insisting that this is their favorite ending.
It's the best ending. And you saying that Kenny is abusive is fucking retarded. There is no basis.
So if a game is going to pose a question this complicated, is it fair to treat both answers as equally valid? And if we can make it through the game without even realizing it's a game about abuse...
It is not a game about abuse. You're fucking retarded.
Then is it actually saying anything about abuse?
No, because it's not about abuse.
Or is abuse just a subject handled with...
Abuse has nothing to do with it!
Yes, honesty and sophistication, but in a game capable of engendering only empathy with, and not understanding of, abuse.
There is no fucking abuse. It is a world overrun by zombies. You have to make harsh choices sometimes. Kenny's the only one who's going and making plans to try and stop. Sometimes his plans aren't the greatest, admittedly. When he's like, I'm gonna, get one motherfucker, take his gun, and then get the next motherfucker. Sometimes his plans aren't well thought out. But he's the only one willing to try and actually fix shit rather than just accepting defeat like these people do in the rest of the group the entire fucking time.
And while empathy is a beautiful thing, and this game can give you a glimpse of what it might feel like on the shit end of an abusive relationship...
It's time to stop!
It's not an abusive relationship. Again, he doesn't even really elaborate.
Isn't part of the problem with abuse that it makes people feel this way?
But what abuse? Like, I know what he's going to get into because I've watched this video in full before. But there's no abuse. The only one who's manipulative, really, is Jane. And we'll get into that, don't you worry.
I get to the end of this game feeling nothing but sick, numb, and hopeless. Is that an achievement?
Yes, that's the purpose of the game. It's a dark, tragic, and bleak game, and that's why I love it.
Is empathy enough?
Empathy has nothing to do with it.
But I confess.
I guess it is a little bit, because I empathize with Kenny because of everything he loses, so I'll give you that.
Biggest issue I take is this. This is not my Kenny.
Yes, he is. You think, oh, Kenny, like, he went through that arc and saved Ben, and then you think that just because he loses his shit, because he loses everything a second time, is somehow out of character, which isn't true. It's completely within character that if he would start again and lose everything, that he would lose his shit. And even then, when he loses his shit, he's still the most sensible in the entire group.
Late in the game, Jane tells Kenny exactly what he is, and
You little prick.
it's a perfect
And it's bullshit.
summation of how abuse works.
Jane is manipulating you every time you deal with her. Don't give me that.
He loves having anyone around that does what he says. That's why he loves this kid so much. We can't talk back yet.
Which is bullshit, because Season 1, he gets mad at you every time you disagree with him. Season 2, not really. Season 2, there's only a couple of times he gets mad at you no matter what you do. So, to say that is just bullshit. In Season 2, that doesn't happen at all, and you're using Season 2 as the example of it. You're just wrong.
Fuck you.
You know the thing about people like you, Kenny? You're just a bomb waiting to go off. Everyone talks about you behind your back because they're afraid of you.
See, and she's just intentionally aggravating him to try and show him as abusive when he's not. She's trying to make him seem crazy by pissing him off in ways that are completely justified to get mad at.
Mike, Bonnie, Sarita...
Mike and Bonnie can go fuck themselves. And Sarita loved Kenny, so shut the fuck up.
Fucking liar, that ain't true!
Everyone around you knows that sooner or later, they're gonna end up dead. Sarita knew it, I know it, and so does Clementine.
End up dead because of him. That's just retarded. Like, it's a world where death is pretty likely due to the zombies and shit. But you're objectively wrong anyway, Jane, because if you choose the go with Kenny ending, he protects her, even in death. And she doesn't die. She survives the series. So what are you talking about?
And that exactly describes the relationship he has with Clem in this game.
No, it doesn't!
But it's not the relationship they had in the last game. Nor is it the relationship he had to Lee, nor his wife, nor his son.
It's also not the relationship he has to Clem. Again, you're making things there that aren't there just because you believe Jane's bullshit.
Remember, Kenny was the guy who caved, who insisted he needed more control but ran away whenever confronted
a couple of times
with it, who threatened people with...
Not to mention, he's just wrong to use that example. That's a shit example to prove his point of Kenny running away. Because you can literally have Kenny kill Duck and he'll fucking do it, so he's just fucking wrong.
Violence, but then when the time came to be violent, either backed down or burst into tears.
Bullshit! What about Larry?
Kenny's whole tragic flaw was being too weak to take action.
He took action with Larry?
It's why he blamed himself for his family's death and why his sacrifice to Ben meant something. So for us to accept that Kenny went from here to here, we have to accept that the pains and losses of the first game turned him into a monster.
He's not a monster. It's such bullshit. Everything he goes through in both seasons, it's perfectly reasonable to think he would be the way he is. You're just retarded. It's also a bit funny that he just ignores the fact that Season 2 even happened, because he's like, we have to believe that the events of the first game drove him here. Completely ignoring the fact that he lost everything a fucking second time!
And that is the broken narrative spit from the lips of 100,000 broken people. People who...
He thinks he's saying something clever saying that, but he's not.
Say, it's not me, it's just this awful world.
It literally is a fucking zombie apocalypse.
People who say, if you'd lived my life, you'd probably be the same.
Kenny never says that. And, again, he goes out of his way to protect the kids. That is all he cares about by the end of the season.
People who say, if we could just get through this crisis, everything would go back to normal.
Again, abuse. Such bullshit. There is no abuse.
The narrative abusers tell their victims.
But Kenny's not an abuser, and he doesn't say these things. He knows the world is fucked, but he never says, oh, if we get through this, everything will go back to normal. But he keeps a sense of purpose, a sense of trying to keep moving on, and that is important. That is what you would need in this situation.
They say it's not their fault. Trauma and abuse are not the same thing.
And there's not abuse in this. You're full of shit.
And while trauma may be used by abusive people to justify being more abusive, the one does not create the other.
That's just not true. That is absolutely not true. Like, again, there's no abuse in this with Kenny. But people who get abused often become abusers. So you're full of shit if you don't think trauma creates abuse.
The one does not create the other where it didn't already exist. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand why they did it, why they used him. The whole question of loyalty depends on having some nostalgic memory for a time when things were better. That doesn't work with a new character. But accepting this Kenny, however well-intentioned, means believing that this is just the inescapable result of too much suffering. It means ignoring all the others.
Arvo has it coming. Why are you like, wanting to protect him? Like, why are you thinking that Kenny is wrong? Fuck Arvo. Fuck that little bastard. Arvo is the reason that anything goes wrong in the last 2 episodes. Fuck Arvo. And fuck Jane for starting the shit with Arvo in the first place. The fact that Arvo literally ambushes and tries to rob you, even if you didn't rob him, he could go fuck himself, and I wish there was a shoot Arvo option.
Who've suffered without acting so horribly, and absolving him of his responsibility for how he treats Clementine.
He doesn't treat Clementine bad at all! What are you on about? There is one scene where he snaps at her. Fucking one!
Bait as it was, the Clem of Season 1 was our ray of hope for the future. One thing complicating our choices was trying to strike that balance. Can Clem learn to protect herself without becoming jaded? Or will the...
You need to be realistic in this kind of situation. You can't afford to be sentimental.
Harshness of this reality cost her, for lack of a better word, her soul, which becomes a stand-in for the soul of humanity, because if a child can't be raised to live in this world without losing hope, what chance does the rest of humanity have? But throughout Season 2, again and again, Clem is given opportunities to choose between hope and something other than hope. Whether or not to rob this stranger of his medical supplies.
Yeah, and then that fucker comes and tries to rob you even if you don't.
Whether or not to ask this woman to stay with you, whether or not to convince...
You shouldn't ask her to stay with you because she's this dumb bitch. And another thing about Jane. Jane teaches you all these survival tricks, which is all shit you already knew. She's so pretentious and full of herself and thinks that she knows so much cool, clever shit when it's all fucking common sense that Clementine already fucking knew. And in case there's anyone who wants to bring up the take out the knees thing, you can do that twice before Jane is fucking introduced in the game. She thinks that she's really special because she shows you to take out the knees of zombies before hitting them in the head, but it's like, I already knew that, like, this isn't anything special. A move which, by the way, you've already done at least once as Clementine, and possibly twice, depending on your choices.
She wants this girl to save herself, and every single time she chooses to trust someone, she is punished for it with betrayal, abandonment, and death.
But, to be fair, had she made the other choice, it would have ended up with the same result, because she's a kid. She doesn't have the agency to control other people. That's the way it goes. She doesn't have that power.
There's no way to finish this game believing hope is anything other than a mistake, except to stay loyal to Kenny, which
you should.
The designers seemingly don't want you to do.
Well, if that's the case, then they're wrong.
So what is our message? You can't trust anyone? Is the correct ending the one where Clem crosses that threshold into adulthood alone, finally able to survive without other people, and prepared to raise a baby by herself as yet another surrogate parent? This ending is the closest thing to uplift you're going to get without turning your stomach, and it's
bullshit. Wellington or Leave with Kenny are both really good endings.
still a hard one. It's part of that disturbing trend making its way through video games right now, the one that says a female character only becomes strong by suffering at the
See, this guy's such a fucking simp.
hands of men. But it is an answer to the game's question. Who will be Clementine's new Lee? Clementine.
Alright. Well, that's We Don't Talk About Kenny. There's a lot of dumbass points he makes in the video, and there's a couple of good ones here and there, but for the most part, it's fucking stupid.
Subscribe to Fiji Red Eye.